Okay, here we are. Welcome, everyone. I hope this is working. Haven't done a live stream in a while. Let's see. Yeah, it looks okay. I mute my own sound there. So, welcome to the live stream. Magic Hal Mermaid. Hello, Magic Hal Mermaid. Good to have you. The topic today is several quotes I posted over the last week on my Instagram. I'll be reading through them and analyzing them, and we're gonna have some sort of question and comment back and forth with the audience if people are interested. Um, with that, I will get into the first quote. I had to pare down this first quote to fit the character limit on Instagram, so I'm going to be sharing it from a Word document. Let's see here. And please let me know if there's any problems with the streaming or sound or anything like that. Let's get these things out of the way here. Okay, so here's the post. That's the snippet of it. But the meat of it is a post about the seven directions of the law of repulse. And that's, as I understand it, one of the laws that governs a disciple as he is further along the path. It must be remembered that the law of repulse, which is the law of the destroying angels, works in seven directions, that it produces effects upon seven different types of beings and of men, and that by reason of its activity it draws the prodigal son back to the father's home. It causes him to arise and go. But we must remember that when the Christ was relating this story, he made it abundantly clear that there was no impulse to return until the pilgrim in the far country had come to himself or to his senses, as a result of satisfied desire through riotous living. This was followed by consequent satiety and loss of contentment, and then by a period of intense suffering, which broke his will to wander or to desire. A study of this story will be found revealing. In no scripture is the sequence of events as they deal with the pilgrim's existence and life in the far country and his return so concisely and so beautifully treated. Seek out your Bibles and study this tale. Read for yourself The Pilgrim's Way. And I'm sure most people watching this probably know, but the story of the prodigal son is this farmer. He has two sons. One wants to claim his inheritance and go off and live his life someplace else. So he's given that inheritance and he winds up squandering it in far country. And he becomes so poor eventually that he's living with the pigs and he's like, oh, it was so good on the farm. And he comes back to his father's house and the father sees him coming and is like, let's have a party. And the other son's kind of upset because he stayed there. But it's sort of an analogy for the soul's journey to come down into the material world. And then when the material world loses its luster and the individual seeks the spiritual again, he starts the process of returning to the father's house. But let's continue on with the quotation here. The effect of this law of repulse as it works out in the world of discipleship and destroys that which hinders, sends the pilgrim hurrying back consciously along one of the seven rays that lead to the center. This cannot be handled in detail here. Our present task is that of treading the path of the probationer or of the disciple, and of learning discipline, dispassion, and the other two necessities of the way, discrimination and decentralization. It is possible, nevertheless, to indicate the goal and point out the potency of the forces to which we shall be increasingly subjected as we pass. As some of us can so pass onto the path of advanced discipleship. This we will do in the form of 7 stanzas, which will give a hint, if one is an aspirant, of the technique which will be exposed. If one has passed further on the way, they will give one a command which, as a disciple with spiritual insight, one will obey because one is awakened. If one is an initiate, they will evoke the comment, "This I know." So the next portion is the direction for the Ray 2 aspirant or disciple, and it's a little bit poetic. The scholar knows the truth. All is revealed to him. Surrounded by his books and sheltered in the world of thought, he burrows like a mole and finds his way into the darkness. He arrives at the knowledge of the world of natural things. His eye is closed, his eyes are open wide. He dwells within the world in deep content. Detail on detail enter into the content of his world of thought, into the content of his world of thought. He stores the nuggets of the knowledge of the world as a squirrel stores its nuts. The storehouse is now adequately full. Sudden a spade descends, for the thinker tends the garden of his thought, thus destroys the passages of mind. Ruin arrives, destroying fast the storehouse of the mind, the safe security, the darkness and warmth of satisfied inquiry. All is removed. The light of summer enters in, and the darkened granaries of the mind see light. Naught is left but light, and that cannot be used. The eyes are blinded, and one eye seeth not as yet. Slowly the eye of wisdom must be opened. Slowly the love of that which is true, the beautiful and the good, must enter into the dark passages of worldly thought. Slowly the torch of light and the fire of right must burn the garnered treasures of the past, yet show their basic usefulness. The seven ways of light must wean away the attention of the scholar from all that has been found and stored and used. This he repulses and finds his way into the hall of wisdom, which is built upon a hill, not deep underground. Only the opened eye can find this way. And that's from Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2, pages 166 to 167 by Alice Bailey, of course. All right. See if anybody, how many lifetimes to, let me see what you're writing here. There's this heart icon in the way. How many lifetimes to reach mastery? I don't know exactly how many. Some have said it's 1,000. Some have said it's 777. I'm kind of inclined to believe the 1,000 number. That kind of fits with me. And the 1,000 are also supposed to correspond to, I think, the subtle petals in your crown chakra, and each lifetime you awaken one of those. Those those sort of correspond to lessons people learn. And if you go a lifetime and you wind up not awakening it, you will you won't unfold that petal. So you might have skipped a lifetime. 144,000? No, I don't think it's that many. That would be quite a lot of lifetimes. But the 144,000 is a special number for other reasons, I think. But yeah, so you might even unfold more than one petal in a lifetime. So the number of lifetimes might vary, but my guess, based on what some others have said, is 1,000. But back to this quote. So this is sort of how the second ray disciple gets in touch with the law of repulse, or how he becomes dissatisfied, metaphorically, in the far country, and decides to start making the journey to return to the Father's house. So for the second ray disciple, there's usually a tendency to read a bunch and have a bunch of knowledge. That's kind of a lower aspect of the wisdom portion of the second ray, which is the second ray being the ray of love, wisdom. And so he reads all these books, he or she he gains all this knowledge, he likes thinking about things, but it's ultimately worldly knowledge for the most part. And then the sort of the light of the soul comes in, or starts to come in, and it disrupts that nicely held room, kind of analogous to the way Jesus came and disrupted the way things were, or, really any prophet or great initiator comes and they bring a new light and it disrupts the way things are organized. And at the beginning, it says the eyes are open, but the eye is closed. And that's really to do with the third eye, if not literally, sort of metaphorically being the eye of wisdom. And so we're getting here that wisdom has more to do with what's beyond the appearances and isn't necessarily a matter of facts or details. So, and wisdom comes from grappling with facts and details and with experience in the material world. It's sort of the fruit of that. The wisdom the son attains in the prodigal son story is by living all this stuff. He learns to appreciate the reality of the father's house through interaction with the worldly things. So, moving on to the next day's quote. Yeah, this is on the Instagram page here. Looks nicer than the text document. Today, knowledge is widespread, and many, many people are already thinking for themselves. The material for discipleship with which the masters have to deal, and the type of person which has to be developed and led on towards illumination, is of a higher quality and grade, if I may employ so inadequate a term. The experiment of changing methods and of implementing the new technique of group work has to be carried out. Likewise, in the midst of strain and stress of the Western civilization. This imposes upon all chosen to participate in this work an undue effort. But if continuance is found possible and success ensues, it tempers the material to a finer degree of power. As has been said, the jungles of the Occident are of a different kind to those within the Eastern zone. They call for peace in turmoil, power in fatigue, persistence in spite of bad health, for understanding in spite of clamor of Western life. Progress is therefore made in spite of and not because of existing conditions. For disciples such as those I am going to attempt to teach, there is no retiring from the world. There is no condition of physical peace and quiet wherein the soul may be invoked, and in which work, potent and results may be achieved in the calm of silence and the rest of what the Hindu calls samadhi. Complete detachment from the calls of the body and the emotions. The work has to go forward in clamor. The point of peace must be found in the midst of riot. Wisdom must be attained in the very midst of intellectual turmoil, and the work of cooperation with the hierarchy on the inner side of life must proceed amidst the devastating racket of modern life in the great cities. Such is your problem, and such is the problem I seek to aid you in. And that's from Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1, pages 5 and 6. And that book is, it's not like a textbook so much as the Tibetan writing letters to these disciples that are working with him in this group project. Stop sharing on that. So that somewhat aligns with the first quote, that there's a process of coming into the world, and especially at this point in time, and coming into difficult situations, possibly stressful situations, and that the wisdom is achieved by managing that, by conquering that, not by withdrawing from that. Because the point he was making there, I believe, is that the service required of those who are earnestly seeking to walk the spiritual path, because service is a great part of walking the spiritual path, is needed in the clamor of Western life. It's not service to be rendered off in some cave or a mountain someplace, at least not generally at this point in time. And fighting to bring through the wisdom and understanding and other virtues is a tough order in that situation, but it's one that has to be done. And I'd just like to invite you guys, if you're enjoying this, please leave a like on the video. It'll help reach more people, and I'd really appreciate it. So if you have any thoughts or comments on these as I go, just leave them in chat and I will comment on them. But barring that, I will move on to the next quote here. Pull it up. Here we go. This is more about bringing higher virtues through. I wish these controls would go away easier. You're recording on Zoom here. Oh well. One of the things which all disciples have to learn to do is avail themselves of the forces and energies which are theirs by right of inherent possession. These are, however, but seldom employed with understanding by the average man or woman. They are usually the victims and not the users of these powers. Few realize how stupendous are the energies upon which they can draw at will. Your problem is predominantly establishing a dynamic relationship between all the inner and subtle forces which are focused in your etheric body, so that you can occultly bring through into outer expression via the physical brain the riches of realization, of understanding, and of wisdom which are your possession. This bringing through is not accomplished by you as adequately as it might be, though you do succeed at times in doing so. By the way, this is one of those letters he wrote to a specific individual, but obviously there's a lot to be gained by this from us who aren't the specific person he was writing to. You should aim at outer expression of the inner nature with greater frequency, and should seek to make conscious the link between the outer and inner more dynamic and real. Ponder on this. The strength, wisdom, and love of every disciple in the world today is earnestly needed. Humanity is demanding help, and the hierarchy is asking for cooperation. And just to clarify, the hierarchy he's referring to is like the spiritual hierarchy. So, like, if you imagine Christ and the Buddha and other people who have sort of passed out of human existence, but are still kind of staying behind and helping and watching. That's what he means by the hierarchy. So this again highlights a struggle. I guess that's a key point about wisdom, that it's attained through a struggle of bringing of this cross purpose of the spiritual and the material, so to speak. In this case, he's talking to this particular aspirant or disciple about how there's all these spiritual riches, this wisdom, this understanding, and other things, I presume, that are sort of connected to his etheric body, which is the energy body. And the streams of energy that are going around your energy body have multiple sources, but ultimately they're from a higher place. And I think if you follow those streams by connecting with them through the etheric body, it sort of opens you up to that greater vision. But manifesting it in your daily life is, or can be, a difficult task. And I think the way that you do it best is to live the highest that you know, or J.J. Dewey said, follow the highest that you know. So if you have a little bit of an intuition or a little bit of a high ideal, or you've developed a sense of right relationship with other people, to really center on that and follow that as best you can. And if you're able to implement what you do have, more will eventually be opened up to you. And obviously, meditation, especially focused on communing with your soul, would help in that degree. Okay. Ascended masters, sort of. Yeah. Yeah, the term ascended masters is kind of used a bunch. It's a little bit of a watered down term of the hierarchy. It's more like a popularized term, but the term used is the Masters of Wisdom in the Alice Bailey and some other books. And the idea is that they've gone through all these experiences of life, and it's easy to fail. fall to physical comforts. Yes, indeed, it sure is. But the masters of wisdom have, through this struggle and through service and all this stuff, kind of reached the level outside of just the human reality. So many of them still have physical bodies that they maintain, or they can just leave them if they want. But, sort of like, you saw Jesus rising from the dead. But they stay around, most of them, or some of them, to help humanity evolve as much as is possible. Thank you for the comments and questions, Mermaid. I appreciate it. All right, let's see. Moving on to the next quote here. And this picture is clearly an AI generated image of Jesus. There's a bunch more of these coming around. I found this one and paired it with the quote. Be interesting to see what happens with AI and images and all sorts of stuff in the future. So, one thing I will add before definitely closing this subject: when the heart is full of love and the head is full of wisdom, nothing then is ever done that can cause distress to others in the long run. By this, I refer not to action, but to the fruits of action. A decision can be made and a line of conduct followed, and the decision can be right, but the eventuating conditions may not be harmoniously adjusted unless there is a subjective freedom from fear, a heart full of love, and that loving understanding which is the truest wisdom. The man who is fearless, wise, and loving can do anything, and the effects will be harmless and good producing. That's also from Discipleship in the New Age, page 143 and 144. So here he's kind of talking about if your heart and mind are truly full of love and wisdom, you might temporarily offend somebody, but in the long run, naught but good can come from that. And so an example that occurs to me is if your mind isn't full of love and wisdom, you might say something which is true and useful to somebody, but you might say it with a kind of resentment, irritation, or anger towards it. And so you've got this stream of something that's intellectually correct, but you've got also an emotional stream that's kind of out of alignment. And so it could cause some harm or some hurt feelings to somebody. But if you say, the intellectual truth and you have pure love or pure intention behind it, they might get irritated because, they don't want to accept the thought that you're sharing or whatever. But in the long run, that love that's there will be a sort of balancing force, and they'll come to see, I guess, your sincerity or the wisdom you tried to share in an appropriate light. And we are coming to the close. There's one more quote to share. If you guys want to talk a little bit more about stuff, I'm happy to. But if not, I'll wrap up after that quote and my sort of summation of things. Let's see. Okay. You're having to get rid of that every time. The question arises, each time a book is written, which is read by earnest aspirants, what line of instruction will carry forward their training with the most speed? For speed is an essential factor. If the present day unfoldment is to be rightly utilized and the stress and the strain of the world relieved, the teaching to be given must likewise increase their mental competency and lead to the stabilization of the emotional body, which will most rapidly set them free for service. It must be remembered that constant study of papers and the apprehension by the eye and the ear of statements anent the ageless wisdom serve only to increase responsibility or produce brain fatigue and soreness, with subsequent revolt from instruction. Only that which is brought into use in the life is of practical value and retains its livingness. Sincerity is the first thing for which those of us who teach inevitably look. And that's from the foreword in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1. So you can get really into reading books on the ageless wisdom or just spiritual or philosophy stuff. But if you're really sincere on walking the walk or following the spiritual path, you have to do something with it. You have to pass on your knowledge or put it into some practical application in some way. And so in a sense, you're taking the spiritual wisdom or ideas in the book and you're manifesting it in reality. And that's part of the why service is so useful, because you're manifesting that process through you, and that's bringing you up the spiritual ladder bit by bit, because you're living the reality of it. You're not just thinking idle thoughts in your head about Jesus or Buddha or different planes of existence or whatever. You're taking those and you're using them for the good of humanity. And maybe that's one distinction of wisdom versus intellect or knowledge, is that wisdom is sort of the using of things for the greater good or for the helping of others, whereas knowledge or intellect can be used for selfish ends or misguided things which will harm others or hold you back. So following that thread of wisdom leads slowly upward to the Father's house, to heaven, to the spiritual realms, to at one with God or the divine. And I think that's a key to wisdom, is wisdom is sort of less tangible. It's more abstract and not concrete. People develop it by their use of concrete things, living in the world and thoughts and struggles. But it's really almost like this serpent or dragon, which moves and shifts depending on the situation. It's not one fixed thing of like, well, you always have to be nice or you always have to be tough. It's not one thing. It changes depending on the situations and the principles involved. So I hope you enjoyed the offerings of these quotes and my analysis of them. I'm interested in anybody's comments or their sharings on what they think wisdom is, or thoughts on it. A few more chats here to read. An unexpected bright light in the middle of the night. Real consciousness is a long journey. Yes, it certainly is, Mermaid. Well, thank you for joining on this live stream, and if you enjoyed it, consider subscribing or sharing, and please leave a like on it. Till then, this is Joshua's Magic. Thank you all for coming. Have a nice day.